Hi, it's Friday Focus Time. I'm Jane Smith.
And I'm Danielle
And
Dionne.
you're?
Danielle Dionne.
So it's Friday Focus. Today we are talking about a really big subject. Oh my goodness. It's spiritual bypassing and how important it is to face the pain of our past so we can live a more peaceful life. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with what does spiritual bypassing mean? And then we're going to talk about why is it important that we understand spiritual bypassing? And this is the shocking part for Danielle and I. We'll talk about that. And then we're going to talk about how can we move forwards towards peace. And we're going to give some steps we can all use to move in that direction. So welcome. We're excited to be here. And so we're going to start with the definition, the term. So the term spiritual bypassing was coined in 1984 by John Wellwood. He's a clinical psychologist, psychotherapist, teacher, and author. And it's a tendency to use spiritual ideas and practices to avoid facing deep pain and unresolved emotional issues. And so that is just a basic definition on it. And Danielle and I have been doing a ton of research. So yeah. So what did you come up with, Danielle?
I'm here too. I've got my marker, my highlighter, my book from this week, taking notes, and of course my research panel for late night, and of course a pencil to erase all of the thoughts that I had that were wrong. And I think it's important to touch on Wellwood's work. You know, we're here because of Peace 360, and I think it's interesting. He was kind of a trailblazer in a way, how he was looking at merging conversation around East and West spiritual philosophies. So this is an important conversation in our bigger world, and as well as how that can affect us in our private relationships. So I'm interested in super relevant. I mean, he must have been onto something if we look at everybody now in the Western world taking on all of this Eastern philosophies for enlightenment. So fascinating week. And so spiritual bypassing, what is it? I came across the term, actually it was on I can't remember what Facebook page it was, but I saw the term and I was like, what does that mean, bypassing? And so I'm excited to dig deeper. I wrote down a bunch of things like what it is, and I really like Jon Kabat-Zinn, how he described it as Zen sickness. I kind of went, ooh, what could that possibly mean, right?
Yeah.
And so we learned about like how we can use enlightenment to be mindless. And I had to really think about that, because most of enlightenment philosophies are really about being mindful and foundational in love. So wow, okay, so what does it mean to be mindless and spiritual at the same time? And so that was very interesting that he described it that way. And it's like to become distracted. And this was from another website, which I wish I remembered, to become distracted, detached by images of spirituality. So, this is big, right? Images of spirituality have a huge influence on us personally and societies and politics sometimes in conversations, and how we divide each other. That us versus them conversation, I think, is weaved into all of this week for me. I was like, okay, if we're going to look at mental health, then we need to look at what divides us and what oppresses us. And so I would say like spiritual beliefs is something at the forefront of divisive conversation. So fascinating. And I also wrote down.
It's interesting because it's the spiritual bypassing. When we were looking into it and the definition of it, it's got a few different definitions, really, and it's really needed in some ways. In other ways, it can be harmful in relationships, but it's needed for some people that have really gone through a lot of pain or trauma in their life. It's healing for them to be able for a certain period of time to focus on maybe just meditation or their church or whatever it is they need to get by something really painful. It's just to be aware that with spiritual bypassing, you aren't really facing the pain of the past, and you can lose connection with people
so easily, right? So I think you're talking, like, what comes up for me there was when I was reading was about like this extremist view of anything, where it takes us away from that common ground and distracts. And sometimes people need to focus on something that's hopeful, and they need community. And so it can be super needed and important.
Yeah.
We don't, I think that was a big piece for me. Some of the examples of like spiritual bypassing I thought were interesting too, like toxic positivity. So like we call it the optimistic bypass, right? Where
I'm trying not to laugh and be like, I'm so positive. You should come to my place of positivity because this is where happiness is.
What? But Jane, I just like had a terrible thing happen. Oh, but stay positive, Danielle. It's okay. And meanwhile, I'm like, so this is when we recognize that, our mindset is dismissive and disconnects us from someone else. That's important to listen to that and to recognize that when that comes up for us, right? So I think another one I thought was another one that was kind of controversial was this idea of the victim bypass.
Oh.
So I read that and I went, oh, what does that mean? So it's the idea of, they mention empaths. So I'm an empath, so I'm easily hurt. And so I don't really have, then it could be, I'm just like, for my learning, it could be that it's said from this view that an empath might not be taking responsibility, because they're an empath, they might not set the right boundaries, or they're over this. So then there could be less acceptance.
Yeah.
There.
I think also, okay, that's touchy. I think for people to be aware that, like that it even exists, it's sort of this, my mind is like, what? I never even thought of this. And now in our culture and the way things are with meditation and yoga and things being so easily accessible, we can just go and they're healthy, very healthy things, but you have to realize that when you're practicing all this positivity and all this spiritualness and reading all the books and then you're out in the world and you're with family and you're not getting along, there's an issue that has to be healed. And so you can be positive and that's good in the moments, but if you want to heal a relationship with someone and there's a big pain in the past you haven't talked about, it needs to be healed. And I think that's where I look at spiritual bypassing as so important, to be aware that it's it can be a cover up, like they say, a band-aid. And it's like, for me, I just think it's so important to get back just for a bit to the past, to say, we need to talk about this because it's really distancing us. Beautiful. Did I already move into the why?
I think it's a bit kind of what is it and why it's important are almost like they lead into each other, right? And I think that's interesting to talk about because you can see like the saint bypass. So that was something I read where, I've got this movement and I'm all knowing and I have this awakening now, and, and we all do this. Like our ego shows up in all kinds of places. And I think it's an interesting thing to think about how, again, that brings us to where you said disconnection, right? And be careful, because especially in personal relationships or in broader society, there's numerous paths to take. And what is that phrase you always say? What you don't know that you
don't know that you don't know. And that is a very powerful phrase because it's a compassionate phrase. It's like what you don't know that you don't know about that person, or about your mom, or about your sister, or your best friend, or what a stranger is going through. So they might have just had something terrible happen, and then they're angry or something. So you don't know, and it's having compassion and listening. But so anyway, should we get into our shocking truth?
Yeah. So.
What's the shocking truth you learned from researching this interesting subject?
I'm struggling with how to word it because it's just so new for me, and it's not super new in like when I think back to my life, or I think back. But I think what's most shocking about spiritual bypass is just the term could lead us to feel like that we have a right to not accept each other. So if I accuse somebody of spiritual bypassing, then they're doing that, right? So I am closed. And so what was shocking for me is when I recognize that in myself, then truly, and I look at them and I learn about them, there's really no such thing as spiritual bypassing, because everybody's on their own journey. And when you see somebody from a heart to heart, then to me, I'm so enlightened by them working on enlightenment, right? Being on a path of awareness and love looks different for everyone. And so if I'm going to make a judgment or, be less accepting of somebody where they are and use the term, oh, they're a bypasser, then what does that say about me? And so I feel like knowing more about spiritual bypassing has helped me recognize that these are terms. There's terms out there that we attach to that create more us versus them language. And we have to be careful. So the shocking truth to me was how it's out there and how it needs to be recognized through eyes of compassion and sensitivity, and as an opportunity to see another person in a different light, instead of not accept that person, like, because then I'm being ego and arrogant too.
Right.
So yeah, because it was like a mirror. It just, and I was like, oh, here I am researching what it is, and I'm like, yeah, I know somebody. Oh, and then I was like, well,
and I think we're all on our own journey of trying to find peace, and we all have things from our past, hurts, emotional pain. All of us, we're human, that we are dealing with, and hopefully they're just scars that we've healed, but there's some huge ones. For me, the shocking truth of when I looked into this was how damaging it can be on a person. And the example would be, if someone's on a spiritual journey and they're really doing well, and for them it's working, that's great, right? But if the other person, especially someone in your circle or who you're close with, family, friends, whatever, because those are the relations that teach us all the lessons, right? So if you have someone that's already on this path and you're not there yet, and the distance is too far you can't just jump to their, oh, come up and be spiritual with me and you'll be fine. To me, the shocking truth was how damaging it is on the person that's not at their level, and they won't come down and heal something. Like it's almost like, can't you come and I feel like, can't you just come and talk about that time when I was a teenager, or when whatever happened, so that I can understand it, because I'm broken. And it can throw someone into depression, suicidal thoughts, like, because they're not being heard or seen. And it's not saying you don't want to live present. We all do. It's saying that come and be with me and let's talk that through, because it's confusing and I'm hurting. And then when the person can actually see with compassion, like, wow, this person's really hurting, I'm going to talk about that time when we were younger. And then out of that comes, oh, I didn't know that you were hurting too. Like I didn't realize that during that time you were struggling with this. I thought I was the one, that wasn't loved or wasn't. And then you have compassion for this person that was also going through something that you didn't see back then. And a connection happens. A compassion connection happens, and you heal. And then they can go back to being present all the time. And so my shock was like, wow, you have to be careful when you're on a path that if you have someone come to you, you need to meet them where they are at for a bit, and have compassion and hear their pain, and right?
Wow, Jane, like, your shocking truth really brings up for me that idea that spirituality is personal and it is different for everyone. Even people that practice the same path towards enlightenment, a similar journey, they practice differently. They need a personal conversation with themselves there. And for me, it's so important that we keep it that way, because we keep it personal and we respect that some people might not have the same path. And so, it's really hard when you see somebody kind of force it on you or put it in your space. And, because spirituality can be really offensive. If that's not your path, it is like my experience with it. I haven't had religion in my life. And in fact, religion has been hurtful. And so when people bless me with religion, I had to really look back, and I'm doing a lot of my heart's work around this to build more dialogue and connection. But I get a feeling of like,
I can feel your
disgusted and like
your
kind of like
mannerisms. Yeah.
Like my whole self is like, please don't do that. Like I'm actually really working hard to not do that. And so in my life. And so it's a personal experience, and we all have had spiritual journeys go different ways. And it's important to recognize and give right to everyone to have the freedom to or not. And otherwise, if you push it, you disconnect. People don't want to join in with you. It's like that dog on a tight leash thing. Like, so now with Peace 360, I'm able to have conversations with all kinds of faiths around the world, different kinds of spiritual practices. And all of us, even if we just look at North America and the different places people practice enlightenment and how beautiful these conversations are, like recognize and respect that common ground is most important to start with, and compassion. And, forcing anyone or isn't helpful, because it's coercive, and that's not peace.
No, and the thing is, you can't. So, and I here with Danielle and I, we're so open to everyone finding their own journey, whether it's in your church, all the different cultures all over the world, or whether it's a spiritual path, whatever it is that works for you. We all need to find it in our own way, and it's so important to put that out there. And we all need something, right, to help us through really difficult times. And then when you are able to talk about things, then you can connect more, right? But it's just like you say with Peace 360, I feel really blessed that we are able to talk about it more openly, of all different ways of finding peace.
Yeah. And it's like spiritual bypassing is a language of divisiveness to me now, like after the week. And that was really the shocking truth, where I was like, wow, okay, yeah, somebody's toxic positivity, that, look at them. What did that just do to me?
Yeah.
Right. So it's really powerful to think about, taking responsibility for our own spiritual self, and recognize it's about healing the past and having language to, find peace and be true to our heart. But it's also about practicing grace and love and harmony. And I don't need to have somebody else's spiritual path to know that. Right. Lucky for me, I have an incredible mom that didn't follow any, organized path, and taught me that through her own modeling, how to go about that. Had amazing grandparents that, were very awesome, moral people, that had spiritual paths, but kept it pretty private, and so I think we have to recognize that we can learn the beauty and the pain without any script, our own script. And what do you do? So what do you do to practice spirituality now, Jane?
What do I do to
you? Yeah.
What do I do to practice spirituality? Mine is more learning to love myself, accept myself, and know that I'm part of something greater, and forgive things that happened in the past, and know that it wasn't me. Like that, if I was broken as a child, it's I really needed to heal, and so now I'm just really aware of my thoughts, and that there is something greater, and I'm all about connection and compassion, and I feel like we need as a society, every person on this earth needs connection and love. And I would say my spiritual path is love. It's just, there really is nothing nothing else when you can see other people with love and kindness and compassion. And so every day I try to be better than I was yesterday and more aware, more compassionate. And yeah, so that's where I'm at. But the spiritual bypassing can create disconnection. So if you're watching this and you feel like, wow, I am really disconnected with this person in my life, and you can then take a step back and be like, why are we so disconnected now? I mean, you can hug and but you know when it's not real. What's happening? Are they on a spiritual path or their religious path or whatever they're doing? And are they trying to force you into it? Because you'll back up. You'll be like, no, we need to find our own way. We need to go through the journey. You can't jump onto someone's spiritual journey. That's theirs. You need to go through your steps to get there and learn along the ways. You know?
Totally.
So we're
so
talk about
right? Like,
what was that?
You just it's such a personal and intimate personal dialogue that we have with what brings us towards our own enlightenment and feeling of security and peace and love. Like, I'm with you there. Like, it's all about that. And I'm a true believer after I talk to people and read about, mental health and all of that. I just see all of these enlightenment practices, and the bottom line is love, right? It's that's it, right? So if you're practicing something towards love and bringing us all together, I'm all about that. I want to know more. Yeah,
exactly. Interesting. So we're going to talk about, what was our third one? How we can move forward towards peace, like some steps we can take for anyone that's watching to try to heal, especially if you have something really big, like a really, really big trauma that's almost too painful to go back. And I mean, then yes, it is important to, if you are spiritual bypassing, because you need it now. But when you're ready, we were talking about finding someone that you can trust. And actually, I want to say this, Danielle, and I think it's super interesting. I was thinking about this. Danielle and I have a really interesting friendship because we just met in August, and we have we're on different paths spiritually. Like we have the same goal. We want peace. We want more love, but we are on our own journey. We've connected now. But we're very safe with each other because we built this trust, and we both listen very compassionately. So we have shared our own personal stories with each other of what we've gone through in our childhood. And it's so healing when you talk to someone and they listen with compassion. It heals you. So if the person that you maybe have an issue with, maybe they've passed away and you can't talk to them, find a friend or someone that trusts that will listen compassionately to you. It's very healing, right?
The tool of listening. Thank you, Jane, for listening, because I know there's been some conversations that I've broken down in tears. And
me too.
And all of this, investigation that we've been doing every week has brought up all kinds of angles to our own stories. And so having to hash those out before we even do our Friday focus has been important. And so I think for me, it's a big tool we can all take away is just to listen to each other, learn listening. Listening isn't something that comes easy for us all. There's a lot of distraction. And so there's lots of art in listening and a lot of skill in listening. And I think it's vital for peace work that we all commit to learning listening better, how to listen better. And it's an art. It is an art. It's not easy, and it's a responsibility.
Yeah.
And I guess the other half that came up for me there was tell stories, because how important is it to hear stories, and how healing is it to see another person and find out like what you don't know about somebody? It is like mind blowing when you sit down heart to heart and you might have had less acceptance with somebody, but when you hear them, you listen to their story. Wow. And when people have the courage and vulnerability to really speak about their experience and what's happening in their heart, powerful. No longer are those walls of, well, maybe you shouldn't have this ego or whatever. That completely comes down.
It connects. That's where you connect.
Yeah.
When we see each other as, because if someone has this image and you think they're a certain way, compassionate listening comes with no judgment. Like
Totally.
accepting someone, the best gift you can give another person is say, I accept you as you are. I don't want to change it. I don't want to change you. I accept and love you as you are, with all our own issues and things we've gone through. That's what makes us human and unique. And it's okay. It's okay
It's
that
so
we've gone through this, right? And it's, yeah, so I think we put up this walls and I know everything's fine. I'm good. I'm fantastic. How are you today? Great, great. And then you're like inside, you're like, I'm not great. So, but of course, we don't want to just go out in the world everywhere and tell everyone.
Hard to share this story when there's that wall of perfection, right? When there's that wall of enlightenment in front of you, like it's like you're like, whoa, like I am right now feeling really, really vulnerable, and that's too much. Like I'm not feeling actually positive. So please acknowledge that life has a spectrum of emotion, and the bad stuff also needs air and love and time. And it's not bad to feel sad. It's not bad to feel mad. It's just is. And I think holding space for people to process and let emotions go through, and also recognize where we create walls for that opportunity. Be open, tell stories, and listen and watch for when they're ready. Right? I think that's such an important part for moving forward towards peace in our homes and in with policymakers and communities, engagement and ways of change in bigger pictures, and of course across borders and all of that. We all need to remain curious, have courage, and listen better.
You can have a really strong connection and great relationship with someone that's on a completely different journey than you. We don't have to all be the same. We don't all have to be like, okay, like here's the group of people that are only grateful, or here's the group of people that are meditate all day long. My husband and I are completely opposites, and I'm on a really strong journey of healing and personal growth. And he's not. That's not him. Yeah. We're completely different.
Yeah.
But if you have compassion for each other and you respect each other's journeys, then the connection's there, really strong.
Right. And I think that's it. It's finding that common ground, right? Yeah. So that's so important. I think one of the other things too that we thought about is to set boundaries, because the truth is that being around some folks isn't safe for us, right? And recognize what we are able to listen to, or what space we are able to be in, because we are also vulnerable and we are also on our own paths. So we have to recognize how to set boundaries, and so that we can be compassionate truly. Otherwise, I think we're at risk of being hurt. You know, if we don't know where we are at, and we're not able to assert that in a way that is kind, firm, fair, friendly, then I think we put ourselves at risk, which creates that harm cycle back and forth, right? It disconnects. When I'm able to set a clear boundary and say, actually, this is my home here, and this is the things that I allow in my home, where I'm practicing, you know, my thinking and my thoughts and my heart's work. And so, you know, when I take myself out of this home, I see all kinds of practice. And, you know, the last thing I want to do is go out there and see somebody, you know, on the street and, you know, but buddy, you know, you need to, I got this, you know, I know how to fix this. We just need to do this and this and this. Like, it's so important that I can set boundaries on how I express my spirituality and how I allow others to express it in my space too.
Yeah, and so I think that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
It's all about non-judging and accepting.
Yeah. No, right? Yeah. And with compassion, we set boundaries. And I think it was Brene Brown that did an amazing little video. So I encourage everybody, it looks like a 3-minute video on connecting compassion and boundaries. And the value of that conversation really hit home for me. And I was like, you know what, this isn't something about setting limits, really hard, you know, this is more about like being true to me. Yeah. And so boundary setting, I think, was a big one. And I think another one, Jane, that came up for me this week was like, in order for us to move on, we have to take self-responsibility and know when it is inside of us, that feeling. For me, it's in my gut, kind of, I start going like this. And when I start pointing fingers, and my body starts getting, you know, less accepting of another and disconnected, it's up to us to know what that feels like within us. When that comes up, it's about me. It's about me not being able to be seen in a place. It's not about, that person's behavior. I can't control them. I can't be them. And I want them to be wholly themselves. And guess what? They likely are. It's just not that they're not like me. So It's important that we all recognize what it feels like within us when we become disconnected, so that we can enter spaces of being wholehearted and true to ourselves. So I think there's a big responsibility in this conversation for everyone to kind of go, oh yeah, like this is where I am less accepting of somebody else because they're doing something different than me, or this is the language I use, that them, those people, that guy, that person, and just really recognize that it's throughout all of our conversations that we create bias and difference. So how do we work but it takes the work of our own enlightenment to get there, right? To recognize our own self, our own awareness, and our own distraction. So I think that's a big piece, like a tool moving forward. Like, what does it feel like? How do I know that's happening with me?
Yeah. And it's about creating awareness and learning. I mean, I had no idea about spiritual bypassing, and it's really opened my mind to being like, okay, that they're just on their journey and they don't have to come back and hash that out. It's my issues. Let people do what they need to do, but realizing the disconnection that happens. And we all want peace, we all want love, we need to heal those disconnects. And I just think when you're aware that what spiritual bypassing is, it is healing in a way, and accepting of people's own journey of healing their own pain. That's what we're all doing.
Right? I love that. So your same thing, learning about spiritual bypassing this week was quite healing for me. I was able to recognize, in myself where I was creating distance. And so I think that, it's a term that's out there that seems quite arrogant, but in the end, it's a term out there to bring more awareness to our differences. And so what an incredible week it has been.
I know it has been. It's a big conversation.
It really, really is. And I think it's an important one when we're thinking about peace work, and going back to John Wellwood and, his study of the East and West, and how important right now in our time to take the differences on and to accept each other and find a place to have conversation about them.
And if we can heal, if we can learn step by step to heal ourselves, and if we need to connect and reach out to someone, find someone compassionate to listen to you, start with healing ourselves and loving ourselves, so that it starts with us to create peace. And next week, Friday Focus, we are talking about love because it's close to Valentine's Day. So we decided we're going to talk about love next week, because that's the most powerful thing out there, is love and loving each other and accepting everyone. So excited. But please add to the conversation if you've been watching. And also with Peace 360, if you are know our website, Peace 360, every week, I think it's on Wednesdays, a blog comes out. So we will have a blog on spiritual bypassing next week. It'll be coming out.
Oh, that's so yes.
Okay, thank you.
So I am so grateful that we brought up this topic, and I hope everybody kind of does a little dig in their own and sees where they could be more connected with another person on their own journey.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Peace, everyone.